You are listening to the North American Kings podcast, your traditional masculinity training ground. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski, founder of North American Kings LLC, a leadership development company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. As we all know, the man brand has taken an absolute beating over the past few decades, and it's our mission to change that. We're going to do that by helping you join the fight to reclaim traditional masculine values. Welcome to headquarters. Training starts now. Welcome back to the training ground, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. We are going to start this episode off with some outstanding news that I can't help but feel giddy about. So let's get started. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Naked Armor Razors and Wet Shave Gear, for their continued support of the show. I know I shave a lot, and it's not because of how skillfully I shave my head with this sword of a straight razor, but because I've just gotten through my first bottle of aftershave. Now, truth be told, I'm almost through my first puck of shave soap as well, but luckily, the ordering process with Naked Armor is phenomenal. Easy navigation on their website with the best products to offer and clear communication throughout the entire purchase process. I just received another aftershave product, the 1776 Shave Balm. This one smells great, ladies and gentlemen, with a muskier scent than the one I had prior, but with all the masculine scents of cigar leaf, mahogany, and cedarwood that you want in an aftershave. Get yourself some today by going to nakedarmorrazors.com and be sure to use coupon code KINGS15 to take advantage of a 15% discount on anything in their online store. Don't wait to start enjoying the highest quality shave you'll ever give yourself. That's nakedarmorrazors.com. And now to the news. This is an announcement that I'm giddy to tell you guys about. No joke, this has come up in almost every conversation that I've had since this news dropped. I'm absolutely thrilled about this, but I'm also wary of some of the consequences. So, the news. OnlyFans is no longer supporting illicit, not safe for work content. Can I get it? Hell yeah! And the reason I'm so excited is, and I cannot tell you how ecstatic I am over this. The reason is this ties into some of what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, right? We did a whole episode on this. This ties back to, and it's actually going to tie into what we're talking about today. And to find out this week that this decision was made in this business, and more importantly, the why behind it, it gives us some hope. All right. So for those of you who don't know, one, I applaud you on your choice of company, but OnlyFans was originally marketed as a platform for content creators to monetize their products through memberships, much like its primary competitor, Patreon, right? So it was intended to be something like what podcasters like myself might take advantage of. Hey, subscribe to my content. I'll post everything here and you guys can come and get my stuff, right? However, it quickly became known almost exclusively for content of the explicit nature, right? It was a content channeled through personal subscriptions. So, for example, a stay-at-home mom up the road with some free time on her hands could spend her time taking naked photos of herself or videos of her doing stuff to either herself or with a partner and sell it to anonymous users online. Let's level the playing here for a minute. Patreon allowed the same thing to go on, okay, on their platform, and it was for a small time. However, before the explicit content began to actually define the brand, and after they got some financial backing, they quickly smothered that, like immediately, before it took over. OnlyFans kind of didn't, they didn't do it too well, right? It happened too quickly. So from a business perspective, this can show you that timing is extremely critical in this process with regards to brand image. Some are speculating that this company won't be able to come back from this. Now, according to an article from Bloomberg Business, starting in October, so October 1, the company will make its shift to the safe for work content. It continues the article. In order to ensure the long-term sustainability of our platform and continue to host an inclusive community of creators and fans, we must evolve our content guidelines, OnlyFans said. Now, what has forced this move was pressure from financial institutions who are not interested in providing OnlyFans with investment capital. Now, this is good news, and it's revealing, I mean, no pun intended, right? From the article, quote, the changes are needed because of mounting pressure from banking partners and payment providers, according to the company. OnlyFans is trying to raise money from outside investors at a valuation of more than $1 billion, end quote. Now, let's not forget, this is porn that we're talking about. I haven't participated in OnlyFans, but porn is vice. You know, it's a vice I've enjoyed. I know what it, I know what kind of content they're providing. It's not like it's not like Instagram, right? This is legit pornography, and it comes with dangers and side effects. All vice does, some worse than others, right? Listen to this staggering statement from the article, quote, the popularity of this social media service exploded during the pandemic as sex workers, musicians, and online influencers used it to charge fans for exclusive access to photos, videos, and other material. OnlyFans has attracted more than 130 million users. Now, one of the primary purposes of this show is to outline the unknown cost of certain behaviors and beliefs. Now, we have a certain point of view that we sell on this show. Absolutely. Like we're not making a secret of that. OnlyFans and sites that encourage a similar interaction between the seller and the customers are dangerous. Now, I've mentioned before that I enjoy strip clubs when I go, right? Not a secret to anybody who knows me. My wife knows. Like, it's open. It's out there, right? There are similar enterprises, but I think the differences between these institutions are key. Now, I don't know about anybody out there, but I've never known a stripper personally outside the four walls of that club. And that's a good thing. And in fact, I've never seen a single stripper twice. In all the times I've ever gone, I've never gone back to a place and have actually met the same stripper more than once. I know you can, but there are barriers to this interaction, and that's the point. OnlyFans blurs this line. I saw a picture circulating on the internet where someone had put a rear windshield cling advertisement on their home SUV advertising their OnlyFans account. Now, let's assume it wasn't a musician or artist who had time to escape the stigma. You know, they've had time to escape the stigma of OnlyFans, right? I don't know a single musician or anybody else who's stuck with that particular, like there are competitors out there. The fact they stuck with OnlyFans leads me to believe that it might be the other thing. All right. Now, on the picture, you can see that there's the stick figure family on the window. Yeah, there's the spouse, 3 kids, and 2 pets. Imagine that car pulling up to any school where those kids go to. Right? I saw a post on a father's website praising OnlyFans for helping vent the pressure, quote unquote, of sexual attraction to women that they know. Now, I'm telling you, this will do the opposite. Okay? That pressure can be lifted temporarily, right? But if you're engaging in an actual process with pictures of an actual person, right? So if the hot lady up the street, gentlemen who are married, like you find her OnlyFans account, like through an advertisement on a wall, like on a cling on her SUV, and you're going to engage with her photos. So like in particular, that pressure again might be lifted temporarily, but the fact that you're engaging with that person, you're actually consuming the product in low doses. Okay, you're actually using her, right? You're consuming her. You know, that's building a familiarity with the content and blurring the lines of propriety that exists between you and the person for a reason. All right. Now, would you ever be able to look that mom the same way ever again after enjoying her content? Neighborhood block party comes around. Are you going to be able to look her in the eye without thinking of the objectification that you participated in? And it doesn't just affect the mom. Now, how about the kids? And now, how would you feel talking to these kids about any mundane topic, knowing that you have explicit knowledge of their mom? And that's like, say you're married too. This is going to get weird. It always does. This from the perspective of an adult. Like, as a teenager, would you want, if you went onto the internet and saw your buddy's mom, take it a step further, would you have any respect for him or his dad, particularly when you've decided to subscribe to see her naked for $5 a month? Yeah, it's just not a good trade, right? Like, again, OnlyFans blurs this, but it's not restricted to just this site. Before OnlyFans, there were accounts out there for Snapchat models, right? So they would take a Snapchat and actually charge a similar fee, and they would actually interact with you. There'd be text messages that you could send back and forth. You'd get messaging, you'd get like snaps just for you. So this isn't exclusive to OnlyFans, but the implication of OnlyFans, I think it brought this type of lifestyle to everyone, right? And that's the reason I do not support this website. The implication of financial institutions bailing on OnlyFans is both a good and a bad thing, right? So here's the other side. Here's where I'm actually kind of on their side a little bit, and you'll hear why in just a moment. I'm glad for once that a conservative move was made by the market. Okay, but it wasn't exactly the market that kind of did this, right? It speaks to a pure truth, right? Now, in the most liberal time of the age, where free love and debauchery are openly encouraged, right? Even now, companies can't be publicly endorsing companies that are known primarily for supporting sex work. All right? There is a stigma to it. There always has been. There always will be for this reason. It's good that something like this is happening. Make it difficult or openly sleazy to participate in. Right? I'm glad this is going defunct. It will be replaced by something. Let's make no joke about it. I'm glad that OnlyFans, it's probably going to die after this, let's be honest. Right? Their brand has been defined by this, and now they're not going to do that. And I think most people are going to find avenues elsewhere. All right? But the people who find avenues elsewhere, they're going to find another way to do this. Right? And it's good, again, that this is happening. But the bad side of this, financial institutions deciding which businesses can exist, is a tough pill for me to swallow. Now, we saw this at the beginning of the Biden administration. You saw book publishers refusing to publish like the works of leaders, politicians, or even some sociologists and psychologists that don't fit the current political mold. Right? Twitter and Facebook being able to deplatform the sitting president of the United States, regardless of who he is, and regardless of what party he supports, is something that should make us all nervous. All right? So I'm glad that a porn platform is likely to end up defunct, but the fact that it's because of the institutional pressure rather than a lack of demand, that should trouble us to some degree. And I said the market, but I kind of like stopped myself there. That's what I'm talking about. The market didn't decide this. Right? People didn't decide this. Institutions did. We just said, hey, the banks said, hey, you guys all agreed and it just like this ain't going to work. We don't want to do this. It wasn't a lack of users. They were a $1 billion valuation company. Like there was demand there. And we know that. That's not a secret. So for all my opining, I know that this is going to be replaced by something because the people that actually subscribe were willing to subscribe. And we haven't addressed that. That's my goal, right? And that's what we're trying to do. Again, curb the demand for this for content like this. I realize that we can't realistically eliminate it, but curb is a step in a great direction. The fact that even institutions are shying away from OnlyFans is telling. Blurring the lines like this, again, in this particular industry, must be a bad thing. But it tells us also that it must be a pure truth. Actively creating pornography will exact unseen costs on the content creators, right? But OnlyFans, it's widely known that there's a cost to that lifestyle. But like before OnlyFans, we knew that. That wasn't a shock to anybody, right? OnlyFans is being praised because they've actually made it a safer work environment for sex workers, but the psychological costs are just that deep. And believe me, there is a cost to that lifestyle. Let me ask those guys who are dating or married as of this moment, how do you think you'd feel about your girl getting paid for explicit pictures or videos of her? The entire point of a monogamous relationship is exclusivity, right? I am yours and you are mine, right? That's wedding vows from Game of Thrones. And there are similar lines found in famous poetic works and even in the Bible. Like if you're actively sharing the most intimate part of your relationship with others, you're denigrating both your relationship and yourself. You're actively accepting that you were not enough for this woman, or that you couldn't provide enough, for the lifestyle that you're participating in, and that failure to provide is forcing your woman to sell your intimacy. That's a tough gig, let me tell you. For those guys who think they'd be cool with it, I'm going to call BS. And even on the show, How I Met Your Mother, this got brought up, okay? Marshall and Lily, like the solid married couple, I want to say solid, but the married couple throughout the entire series, like they had a dollar amount set where it would be acceptable for Lily to take in exchange for sex with her. And she's played by Allison Hannigan, and I got to say, she's a very attractive woman, but the price that they set was in the millions, which that's a fun game to play, right? But they actually ran into a situation like that in the show, and you can see that they actually negotiated a bit, and you can tell that Marshall, the husband, is uncomfortable with the fact that he's haggling over the price of his wife. The whole thing turns out to be fake, but you can see that even that was a line they were unwilling to cross. And you can see he's kind of uncomfortable with that. Right? I was speaking with a gentleman recently about a breakup he was going through. Now, it was an off and on situation. There was no marriage, no kids together. And in speaking with the gentleman, he was worried that on social media, that his girl was still active. Yet she was kind of ignoring him for the most part. And then as he was explaining the situation to me, he mentioned that he had helped her establish a quote a joint OnlyFans account. And I stumbled for a second, and then I asked him to clarify. So apparently he was like producing, like behind the camera, these videos and this project like a producer. Right now, he even admitted that it wasn't a glamorous process for either her or him. And I'm not meaning to judge people for doing what they have to. I mean, pandemic shut down a lot of businesses, but and I'm not going to judge anybody for doing what they need to do in order to make ends meet. But there might be other ways to go about it. What struck me was that after the breakup, now this guy has a problem with the fact that she's continued that work. Right? Now, that's what he and I had to discuss at length. Like, why do you now feel weird that your girl's selling intimacy that's not yours anymore? I feel for this guy. He helped this girl get hooked on the cash that comes from selling her dignity. And now she's still at it. The false sense of control that he felt in this situation was shattered after the breakup. And upon his discovery that she was continuing the trade, well, were I single, there's nothing that would make me look up content about my ex. He had to coach this guy away from that as well. And I've heard that argument for OnlyFans as well. You go back to some dad groups. Now, let's be clear. You're only maintaining a toxic attachment to an ex-girlfriend by doing this. Somebody had mentioned, hey, look, you want to get over an ex? Go to her OnlyFans and get your fill. Yeah, tell one of your brothers that you've subscribed, you're paying your ex to see pictures of her, pics and videos of your ex-girlfriend, right? Like all of the other internet simps out there. It's not a power move. It's sad, and your brother should tell you as much. Okay? You're continuing the addiction. All right? You need to stop yourself. Cold turkey. All reasons to dump OnlyFans. But that leads me to the primary topic of today's episode. It was not to rail on this company, but it is extremely relevant to what we're going to talk about. Now, I want to prepare you men for crisis management. This topic can be wildly impactful in multiple ways, particularly for your level of manhood. All right? Hell, I've been named best man at weddings strictly because I'm the guy who can get things done. Now, sure, I was a contender for best bro, but if the deciding factor was could I keep a cool head under pressure, then all the better, right? If that's an extra edge, great. Now, remember, as best man, you're there to get the groom over the finish line, right? And you're the bride's go-to guy. There are etiquette things that you have to be responsible for. It's work. Being the best man, it's work. And in the days of old, groomsmen were actually meant to be the guards in the case the wedding was attacked or someone tried to kidnap the bride. In an interesting article from Reader's Digest, quote, in some traditions, groomsmen were called the bride's knights because they helped carry the bride to the wedding. Best case scenario, they were taking her from her disapproving relatives to be joined with the man that she loved, protecting her from would-be kidnappers. The other, more troubling scenario is where they were the bride's kidnappers. Like, groom said, go get them. It's believed, to continue from the article, it's believed that the best man role originated in 16th century German Goths as the groomsmen who kidnapped the bride. The best man then stood next to the bride during the ceremony to prevent other suitors or family members from taking her back, and to make sure that she didn't run away. End quote. Now, interesting article, and I like to think that in most cases, I'd still be the best man. But I digress. Being able to control yourself in situations of crisis is a skill valued in men. Even those who are soft-spoken can maintain this demeanor, but you can still exhibit a quiet control in the heat of the situation. Now, today, we're going to look at this from a multitude of levels and from different angles, okay? Now, I like giving you guys processes to flow through. Boy, do I love processes, but why? And it's because processes can be followed, and better yet, they can be practiced. Now, I had an old basketball coach back from elementary school, and I haven't seen this gentleman since the third grade, but I can tell, and I want to tell you his name. Don't mean to throw that out there, but he used to say this. He used to say, it's not practice that makes perfect. It's perfect practice that makes perfect. Now, hearing that in the third grade, again, impactful, right? You want to practice as if you're in game mode. You want to practice as perfectly as you can, because practicing for perfection is the way to go. And if we have a good, perfect, or near perfect process, we should get near perfect results. All right? But why, more than that, why is practice important? Believe it or not, I learned this from a Star Wars book. Now, this was like in high school. But in the book, The Hutt Gambit, the second book of the Han Solo trilogy, before Disney went off and created the Star Wars Legend brand, which is awful, by the way, Han Solo is giving advice to a young spacer who is about to take place in this battle between the Imperial Navy and a bunch of smugglers. Okay. Now, this young kid who was working with Han at the time on the ship that he owned before the Millennium Falcon is worried that he's going to freeze up during the fight. Okay. Now, Han Solo, an Imperial Military Academy graduate, has this to say, quote, "Yeah, people do freeze sometimes in battle, but that's why Mako and I have been getting everyone out there in their ships for all these battle drills. We did the same thing when I was with the Imps. You drill and you drill. And the reason for that is that anyone can freeze when faced with real combat, even combat vets. But if you know the drill cold, chances are that even if your brain freezes, your hands and body won't. They'll go on autopilot, keep on doing what they've been drilled to do, even though your mind ain't giving them instructions for a few seconds." And he continued, "Then your brain is going to kick back in. The fear will still be there, but you'll be able to work past it, around it. It won't slow you down anymore. You'll just keep on doing what you've got to do, and you'll be all right." Now, that was, I don't know if it's tacky to get life advice from a fiction book, but the principle has held true for me over the years. Right? You hear stories of like wizened warriors, right, who act on instinct. It's the same thing. Situational awareness through an unknown crisis, combined with physical training that can help pull you through situations where thinking too much can be just as bad. Now, these are real examples of when processes, particularly in crisis situations, can guide us. Now, from the Journal of Industrial Marketing Management from July 2020, issue 88, quote, "The word crisis has its origins in the Greek word krisis, which denotes choice, decision, or judgment. It often refers to a turning point or decisive moment, implying that the historical meaning of the word might presume some individualism rather than determinism in terms of reacting or acting in volatile situations, at least denoting choice at some decisive moment. Now, it notes that depending on the discipline, this can be something that challenges basic assumptions or disrupts an organization's basic functions up to its very survival, the meaning crisis." Okay, as noted in the article, after observing multiple cycles from a multitude of organizations, a pattern has emerged. Oh, yes. We love patterns. Patterns repeat. Patterns are processes. Right? Now, these are tangible phases to every crisis, and it starts even before you can sense it. So here are the phases, okay? And I'm going to define them for you, okay? So pre-crisis normality, okay? Now, in this time frame, crisis is at best a scenario, a theoretical discussion. Right now, here is where we predict, prevent, plan, and postpone if it's somewhat of a reality. I mentioned a couple weeks ago in passing to you that my wife and I have talked about, like, what do you do if you were attacked by a bear? Sounds dumb, but pre-crisis normality, right? At best a scenario, and at worst, oh, we actually did need to think about that, right? Again, it sounds dumb, but you go through these exercises because why not, right? Now, you get to crisis emergence. Now, this is kind of the build-up towards the crisis when the potential first indicators can be observed. Okay, we'll go through an example here in a minute, but this is where you're still preparing and postponing. You're buying time. You can kind of sense that something's changing. You kind of see like the first clouds forming for the storm that's going to come, right? Now, pace, and we'll talk about pace in just a second here. Pace will be a huge factor in handling the unfolding situation. The next phase here, crisis occurrence. Now, this is when the crisis hits the individual or organization and requires immediate action. This is where we're reacting and responding. Now, we're beyond the strategic here. This is tactical. This is communicating. This is get the battle done. And this is where speed can reduce the impact. The faster you can react, the better off you'll be. And this is also where we cannot overthink it, okay? Thinking, again, takes time. If we overthink, this is the time for action. There's a thing that you'll hear about. It's called the analysis paralysis. It's where you spend so much time thinking of the situation that the situation is actually unfolding more and more and more, and the impact, in most cases negative, are spreading. And we want to get through that. Now, you've got the crisis occurrence. Now you've got the crisis aftermath. Now, this is where the crisis slows down in intensity, but it's still happening out there. But the end can be seen. Now, the points here, we want to recover, rebound, and we want to remember and retain the knowledge that we've gained throughout the process. And then that last phase, we get the post-crisis normality. Now, this is where the crisis is over and the organization or individual is now in a state of new, like a pre-crisis normal. Like we got through it, hey, back to the old things. Or did we have to fundamentally change things after the fact? All right. But knowing these phases you'll go through, it's not enough. So we need some context. So there is a framework for that. Okay. Context is key. Man, there's a lot of cliches today, but context is key in this, okay? So framing the crisis, these are the critical situational factors that will dictate how things progress, okay? You've got the outline, right? Who the outline are, like it's who are the actors, okay? Who's involved? The second, what is the content? So it's a crisis of what? Is it a crisis of the market? Is it a crisis of health? Is it a crisis of conscience? Like, what is this? What's the choice that needs to be made? What's at risk? And then lastly, we've got speed or pace. Right now, how fast this is going to hit and how hard and how sudden things can change will dictate your pre-planned strategic response. But it will also dictate the pace at which decisions need to be made. It outlines how long do you have to think about this as you make decisions. Right? Knowing kind of the natural, you can kind of feel a pace to a crisis. How fast do things go? Do you have time? That will sort of dictate, the next steps forward. Right? Now, from an entirely business perspective, OnlyFans is going through this right now. They had a crisis of capital and of vision, right? Their crisis of vision, they let the problem progress too long. If they wanted to be an open source for open platform for any content creators, great. But if they ever thought that pornography on their site would be a risk, well, I'm sorry, they did not plan for that at all. And when they found the problem, because believe me, if even I know about it, because I do not go to sites like OnlyFans because I want my content for people I have no hope of ever meeting, right? And the fact that I know about OnlyFans and just what can be on there, that's proliferated far too much. And the business didn't get in front of that at all. They almost embraced it. Now they've got a crisis of capital because people have not accepted that vision, right? So we're going to see whether or not they can pull out of this. Or they're going to go the way of Tumblr, which is what a lot of people are thinking, that they let Tumblr let itself be defined by pornography. They had a problem, they cut it off, and the website's dead. People are assuming that OnlyFans is going to end up this way. However this shakes out, believe me, in the here and now, they're in crisis mode. Critical crisis planning and execution doesn't apply strictly to business. Here's a real-world example that we can go through, okay? So take an emotional issue, a breakup. Okay, you're going through a breakup. Depending on the situation, there might be a way to salvage the relationship, but in either case, you need to frame things. Actors. Who? There's you, your partner, kids, maybe. Content. Well, the relationship is either over or it's salvageable. You'll have to kind of pick. And then pace. How sudden was this decision? Were you both hinting at this before you decided to give up? Or was there like a blow up argument and then just we're done? Right? Worst case scenario is when the pace is different for both parties, right? Like sudden for one person, but it was a slow build to a decision for the other. Now, I've been through all of these and it's not awesome. All right. So if you're going through this, I empathize. All right. Pre-crisis. This is going to sound callous, ladies and gentlemen, but I gotta ask you, did you have a backup plan? No? Well, if you should. Okay? If you're going through this right now and you didn't have one, you're going to be tested. If you're in a relationship, I'm telling you, do this. Now, I've got one of the most, if not the most solid relationship I've ever encountered or witnessed. Okay. If it's not the best relationship out there, it's a contender. Now, even having said that, even I have a backup plan should the worst happen. Why? Because it would be stupid not to. And for men, it's far more devastating to go through this at any level without a backup plan, but particularly if you're married. Okay. Marriage is a fabulous institution when everybody treats it as they should, but divorce law is not an equal playing field. We've mentioned that before. We've had divorce lawyers on, and the reason for that is because while marriage is a great thing, divorce is not. It's not meant to be, right? But have an exit strategy, right? Now, per the article, at worst, it's just theoretical at this point. Okay, and you're in pre-crisis, okay? Having a backup plan at worst is just theoretical. At best, it will save you. Okay? Now, go back to breakup, crisis, emergence. Now, are you both talking about being single? Even out of context, like, oh man, back when I was single. Or, she's talking about like, stuff she would do with her friends if she was. Now, back to COM 102. Again, source material. Thank God I kept my notes. Are you moving from referring to yourself in the plural, we? We like this restaurant. We go to these places. Now, have you reverted back to I and you? Hey, I like doing these things. She likes doing those things. You go over there, right? Or have you become less affectionate? Now, this was my big tell back when I was dating. I did sure that we hadn't had physical relations for at least a month. In order to ensure that I didn't have like an oops baby cooking in the oven on accident, right? Before a big breakup, right? Now, these things again, why would you want to be intimate with someone that you're planning on breaking up with? Most people feel it's just like natural, right? Now, there are those things that you can smell, right? Communications break down, physical things change, right? Though that's the storm clouds are brewing. You guys can feel that. Okay, crisis occurrence. The breakup happens. It's crushing. In some cases, it's emasculating. Like, what do you do? Now, assuming you have a backup plan, you enact it. With breakups, once you're split, it's pretty well set. Now, what's your tactical response? Now, here is a tool that can help. I love this tool to death. I'm going to talk about this with glowing admiration for whoever came up with this. Thank you for this time-tested tool, okay? We're going to talk about SWOT, okay? That's SWOT, okay? Now, a tool that is used primarily in business but can be broadly applied anywhere that you might need it. Like, okay, it sounds complicated, but it's really not. And the best part of a tool like this is that once you've done it once or twice, it's something that can be done at any level, monumental or minuscule, okay? You can start doing this in your head quickly. Now, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay? SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But simple enough, right? Now, good, because it should be. Again, as we break this down, you'll see that this is not a complicated subject. Okay, now this is usually on a grid. So you'll have like that cross, you'll have your 4 quadrants, right? but it can be easily done in outline form with just like a pen and paper. Now, if you get good enough, you can just do this in your head. Okay, now in pre-planning, preparation, and strategy, this tool can be used to outline your priorities. Okay, so strengths. We are good at these things. We should capitalize on them. This is an offensive category, which will help us maximize the offensive and the effectiveness of the actions that we're taking. If one of your strengths is having no weaknesses, that's great, but that's not impressive, okay? We're emphasizing the defense. All right? This is an offensive category. That, again, remember, let's take in football, for example. If you can keep your enemy, your opponent, at 0 points, your chances of winning wildly improve. And that's good, but don't forget that to win, you must put points on the board. So offense is entirely necessary. Okay, so strengths. What are we good at? What plays do we run? Okay, what are you good at? In the breakup scenario, you make decent money, right? And whatever bills you have for the time can be covered, right? You have a support system. You have friends or family. Do you have a separate infrastructure? Do you have like separate bank accounts? You have your own car? Like all these things. Like these things are assets, right? Do you look good? Like, are you a confident guy? Do you think you can rebound? Worst case, have you already, like, were you the person to initiate this? Are you already done? Is there, like, you're going to go through the grieving process, but is the strength that you're going to be able to go through that pretty quick? It might be, okay? Now, weaknesses. Now, these are our defensive positions. Depending on the depth of our weakness, they can be minor or major, right? Like, if this hit this one little thing, I'm done. Right? Baby's got the soft spot on their head. It's a total system reset. Do not touch that button. Okay? Guys, our physical anatomy, down south, we know that's a weak spot. There's equipment for that, right? Like, that's a weakness. We must keep it from being exploited. A risk analysis, which is another tool, can help you determine the damage that would happen if that weakness were exploited. But again, that's a conversation for another day. Now, just be aware that the impact of each weakness, that impact you need to understand, all right? And in this instance, right, the weakness is static. It's unmoving, okay? It's vulnerable if certain things happen, okay? A weakness is static, like it will be, it's conditional. And because they're known, we can fortify them. Again, back to the breakup. You're emotionally vulnerable. You will be. If you were to lose this person, like how detrimental would it be? Now, have you fortified yourself? You can, but that's something that we need to think about. And don't feel like do you not feel like you can reach out to others? That's another emotional weakness. If you're married with kids, you've got to worry about the kids. Where are they going to stay? Where are they going to be? Are you going to see them again? Can you split off and afford your own place, or do you need to stay with a friend or family until you get things worked out? Do you have a car of your own? Do you work together professionally? Like all of these things are, worst case, you got to figure those out. Okay? Now, opportunities. These are areas for improvement. These are your offense plays. Okay? This is offensive planning. Now, we can use our strengths and attack these points to gain maximum benefit. Okay, these opportunities are out there. Okay? Now, in the breakup scenario, you've got, other girls that you can date. You've got hobbies that you can identify, that you can occupy yourself with to help get you through this bad time. There are things that are out there but are not currently active that where you click, boom, I'm done. I'm going to get it now. Okay? Now, do you have a cheap way to fulfill the needs that were provided for by the marriage environment? Like that's another opportunity for you. Okay? Now, threats are the potential events that could exploit your weaknesses. Okay? Now, these are active things that can be that you can prepare for, but they would require you to act upon a contingency plan if they did occur. Okay. Now, a good example is that if you're like launching a cool product and that there's relatively simple to make, a threat would be another competitor sees that and is like, hey, I make a similar product. They make a couple tweaks and now they have a like product of a similar price. All right. A patent would protect you in this for a time. Hence the threat was mitigated, right? Your weakness was you had a product that was simple to make. Right? The threat was, hey, somebody else decides to make this. It's active. Somebody decides to jump back into that market. Boom. You've got a patent to protect you. Okay? Now, breakup. Your threats, you've got joint bills or rent that she's going to want. Are you on a lease that she's going to enforce? Right? Like if you're in an apartment, you're on a lease, like your name's on it and her name's on it. Right? You move out, she could easily say, hey, you still need to pay half the rent. Now, you could strong arm your girl or whoever's staying there could strong arm and say, you can strong arm that person and say, I ain't paying. You know what? You're going to get kicked out if you don't. And sometimes that gets worked out, but that's a counterpoint to a threat that's been made. Right? Now, worst case, you'll be forced to cohabitate in an apartment with an ex. I've done that, and that's awful. And is she going to enjoy her new freedom by parading new guys around? It can't happen. Now, do you have a joint set of friends that you'll now have to kind of split off from, or you'll have to split up your friend group? Now, do you have to find other social circles to interact with? Do you have to find a new job? These are all things that could happen or that you might have to deal with. Now, a SWOT exercise can be done in your head, right? As situations unfold, the best way to do this is categorizing each detail when you get it. And that will help you build a working model without having to go back and think of everything and then go back into it, okay? So it's a great exercise for strategic planning, and I encourage you to continue to practice that as new information comes along in any given situation. All right? It doesn't need to be crisis mode for you to be planning for one. Okay? Now back to the pattern. Now, once the crisis is over, you're tactically executing your backup plan, but now you can see the end. This is the crisis aftermath. Now, when the intensity slows down, you see an end. To the breakup example. Now, after you've kind of figured things out, what does the situation look like? You've figured out what's materially impacting you. You've got food, water, shelter, access to work, and you've got some funds to yourself, okay? You're not going to die, right? You've landed, you've got a place to stay. Now you maybe have some things to work through in the very immediate, especially if you have kids, divorce and all that stuff starts. But once those things start, the worst of the storm is over. You can kind of see what the end looks like, but there's still work to do. The question is, now what? Right? You can slow down and you see through the rest of your plan, and you can begin to work on it. The pace slows down at this point. Now, this is where you're taking opportunities and you're avoiding or suppressing threats. Now, are you in a good place, or do you need to distract yourself with hobbies, working out, or diving into your work? Right? Like you can kind of project out and see into the future and kind of see that hologram, the things that aren't there yet, but it's a clear picture, and you can kind of navigate, hey, I'm going to make these couple moves quick because they're coming at whatever pace you've decided. Then there's the new normal. It may be different, but it's stable. Now you can build around the new life structure that you've got, right? You've got a new set of inputs, things that are static, things, restrictions, assets. You've got a different set of inputs. Now you can build your reality around that. Now, I want to do one more cool thing for you guys, because I absolutely love you, the listeners. One more critical tool for you: critical process paths. Okay? Or process critical paths, however you want to say it. Guys, God, do I love this tool. Okay? It's an amazing tool that if you can grasp right now, or even years from now, it will improve your work, your home life, your crisis management skills, and overall planning ability. Okay? Now, people with a sense of critical paths are able to pivot and look like God geniuses when things go crazy. Okay, now imagine you have a goal. There are 5 things that need to happen in order for that process or that goal to be achieved, or that process to be completed. Okay, there's some nuance here that will add some depth and bring up your game. I will pepper that in a minute. Okay, so of those 5 steps, or those 5 things that you need to do in order to hit that goal, are any of them sequential? Like 1 is the thing, 2 needs to happen first, and then 4 and 5 can happen in that order. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that tasks 1 and 3 aren't necessary, but they don't need to go in that order. Okay? Now, the next step in this process is to determine how long these things will take to get done. Now, this is what you might need to refine a bit with regards to skill set. Like, this needs to be ironed out. You need to be decent at this, okay? Now, a good estimate of time is critical to this process. Now, I had an executive tell me just this week that we had 3 months to do something. I had no choice but to correct him, and I don't like correcting this gentleman, all right? But rather than 3 months, it was more like 6 weeks, half of the original estimate. Right now, that put his ask into greater relief. He still wanted it done in that time, but the urgency of his ask became a lot clearer. And now, because I outlined that, I'm getting more resources in order to get that job done. All because I read a calendar faster than he did. Right? And I'm being facetious a little bit, but his perception of the situation was off, and that needed to be corrected before the work continued. Now, which process or which step takes the longest to accomplish? This is critical. Also, which processes are connected to each other? We mentioned 1 or 2, 4, and 5. Now, this chain is critical to the entire process, especially if those things end up being the longest stretch of time necessary, right? If task number 1 is going to take you the entire time, it's going to take the longest amount of time. It's going to take 4 days, and all the other sequential things will take 3. Well, you need to ensure that number 1 gets done, because that's going to push out your time. And that's the entire reason for any of this sequential steps. The reason for any of this is that if those sequential steps take longer than expected, or if that one thing takes longer than anything else, the entire process, the entire time that the goal will take, the entire process will be pushed out. Now, as the issue becomes more pronounced with dozens of steps and tasks necessary to reach a goal, keeping your eye on the critical process path will allow you to ensure that the group has the resources and those resources focused on the right things that are necessary to keep everybody on track. Okay, now I know that it was a mouthful, but the idea is if you are focused on one thing, but that one thing is not the thing that's going to push things beyond where they need to be, you need to be focused on that critical process path, right? The things that need to get done that can't be done at any other time. They can't be done while 2 things are happening, while we've got dwell time. Those things need to happen 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now don't believe me? Here's an example. Now, my wife wants to take the boys to a movie. Okay, this happened very, very recently. Okay, the goal is to get everything done this weekend. I've got to get this episode published. I've got to get the yard mowed. I got to go to church. I got to finish the honey-do items. I got to spend time with the boys. And now we have to go to the movies. Okay, the yard takes 2 hours between mowing and weed whacking, right? The church is an hour, but to go there, we've got to get the 3 boys bathed. You got to get them dressed nice for Jesus. You've got to get fed before and after. You've got to get them transported. So ultimately, it's going to take like 3 hours, like start to finish. Okay, the honey-do item isn't critical, and if necessary, it can get done next weekend. All right, now my wife wants to crowbar in this trip to the movies and toss that into whenever. Right, to even do that, we know that we've got to get the boys fed, dressed, and we got to buy tickets to a show in a given time slot, get there, and we got to enjoy it. All right. So as my wife and I scramble to get things done, we've kind of handling each part of the process in order to shrink the whole amount of time that it takes to get the whole thing's done. Like she's, feed the kids before they're dressed in case the clothes get dirty, which would force us to redo that work. Right? You can't forget to pack the diaper bag. You got to call the babysitter to see if they can handle the baby Saturday or Sunday. But oh wait, she's only available on Saturday, right? So that kind of restricts us to holding this movie event on Saturday. Now, do the other necessary items, or can we work those out in the time that we've got available? We've got to avoid that bottleneck that just got created. Now that we know that there's a firm restriction, we have to manage around it or completely abandon going to the movies. To fit that in, we can take an equal but separate task and trade positions, especially if they're non-sequential. Right? Now, in each one of these sequences, feed, clothe, transport, and action is it's one of the critical paths, and we've worked that out. Why? Because we've done it time and time and time again. If it takes 2 hours to feed the kids for whatever reason, well, that pushed everything out. They can't leave the house before they get fed and clothed, right? That's just a given. And trust me, when kids aren't fed, it's an all stop, right? Why? Because it's my job to feed them, one. However, if they're not fed, you won't hear the end of it until they are fed in some cases. Now, believe me, I don't skip out unless we're actually training them for something like, hey, eat the food we give you. Right? So you guys can start to see a pattern. It's chaotic, right? But if you were to actually go on an Excel sheet and actually just list out all the things that happen, you can see this spread out, and you can kind of work out a rough time frame and get used to how long things will actually take. It's a good practice exercise to actually use to actually draw this out. Now, try it out when you've got the opportunity. You can do it at home, school, and work. Start with things that will take the longest. Identifying those items like, hey, this repair on my car is going to take at least all of Saturday. Okay. Well, if you're going to plan in your weekend, plan on one whole day worth of doing that. That's 8 hours. Boom. Car repair. Second, you want to identify things that will push the project behind if something goes wrong. Now, don't forget, if you need to supply up for anything, to get done on the list, however long that takes will ultimately push your timeline back, getting supplies. Right? If I don't have the supplies to start, well, I don't do anything. So if it takes me 3 days to get supplies, well, guess what? Your process just got pushed. Right? But here's the spice. Material supplies is a prime example of what we call an external activity. Something that's required, but ultimately can be done whenever. The machine doesn't need to stop. This can be done before the process starts. Having supplies is required for the process to get started, but getting them isn't. It doesn't start with, hey, I've got to go to the hardware store and get these things. I could do that a week beforehand if you wanted. You can get parts whenever. Okay? You don't want to run out? Well, and that will put you behind. Just get extra whenever you decide to get it. Threat mitigated. Now, being able to distinguish internal and external activities, internal being the things that have to happen while you're in the thick of things, or external activities, things that can be done and prioritized and planned for outside of the process. Identifying these things and identifying the critical path will make things so clear to you and make you look like that genius we were talking about earlier. Now, if there's a solitary activity that is required to get the overall task or goal accomplished, do that when the critical process allows, especially if it's not the longest thing. Okay? Have you guys ever watched paint dry? God, I hope not, right? And the reason is that's a prime time to get external activities done while there's a dwell time within a critical step item, right? You're painting a room. Well, paint. But once you paint, you got to let it dry before you can hang up banners or hang up pictures. Or you're not going to just watch it happen. No, if it takes 2 hours to dry, like if that's the time, you can do anything in that amount of time, especially because that wall ain't getting touched. Take that time to prep for the next step or to accomplish side items. If not, that'll just push out the work farther and farther and farther. Now, your job will be to see the clearest way through the timeline, making sure nothing gets dropped or forgotten. Ensuring that things don't fall behind is what is going to set you up as a baller crisis manager. All right? Now, there's no better feeling in the world than others reacting positively to your masculinity. This will be a reaction to either your strength of character or your strength of will or your strength of body. Right? But being able to filter your emotions and continue to see rationally is key to this. Okay? Having processes that you've grown comfortable will help with this. Now, being in control of oneself is a pillar of traditional masculinity. You naturally take men who fly off the handles less seriously. Like that drunk guy who's losing his cool at the bar is not what people are calling the manliest man ever. I'm sorry, it's just not. And being in control of your emotions is a critical component of crisis management. You will not be able to execute a plan if your emotions are keeping you from physically seeing a big portion of it. Being emotionally crazed or being angry. In fighting, a lot of people try to make you angry. In a competition, they'll want to get you agitated. Why? Because that will limit your view, limit your perspective, and keep you from seeing things that are in the peripheries. That's where they will attack, or that's where the situation will get out of control. Now, everything we've talked about today are ways to ensure that the plan is correct, because in having a good plan can help you navigate uncertainty. It can help you ground yourself emotionally. Okay? If you have a good plan, hey, there's less to get angry about because you know how to react. It's less of a shock. It's less of a worry. It will keep you from despair and keep you focused on a path forward. Paths forward, again, get us to the goal. Now, lastly, here's an exercise that you can use in order to ground yourself emotionally. I've used this time and time again. This grounding of your emotional self is the second component to being a good crisis manager. All right. Now, in this exercise, its roots are in martial arts. Now, I've heard this proverb a while ago, and I haven't been able to verify it, but the fundamentals are true. I've worked them out. A martial arts master was asked, which martial art had the most powerful kicks? Okay, after thinking, the master said boxing. The interviewers were shocked, and they were like, they don't kick, they said. Well, then the master explains the amount of power that boxers generate is incredible, and they generate it by kicking and sending all that power into the ground. Now, as we know through just exercise and stuff we've done, most of our power comes from our feet and our hips, right? If I'm going to generate a punch, I got to twist my hips. How do I twist my hips? Well, I'm driving my feet into the ground. That drive force back up through your leg, pivot through your hips, and power the upper body. Okay? Now, by relying on this, you can use an exercise in order to capitalize on your strength and power. But you can do this in order to set your emotions in check. Okay, now here's what I want you to do. What I want you to do is imagine that all of your emotions, especially the ones that let's say you're angry. Okay, you're angry. All that anger, that emotion is a gas floating inside you. Okay, now what I want you to do, I want you to take your feet. I want you to space them so that they're shoulder width apart. Okay, now also, I don't want you to be on the balls of your feet. I want you to keep pressure on the balls of your feet for sure, but I also want you to put pressure on your heels, okay? I do not want you to lock your knees, okay? So this is a weightlifter's stance, okay? Now, this allows you to generate the most power to be transferred straight into the floor so you can lift, okay? So this is a lifter's stance, okay? So pressure over the entire surface area of your foot. Okay, feet shoulder width apart, tensed. Do not lock your knees. Now, what I want you to do, I want you to tense your shoulders and your arms, your upper back, your chest, your whole upper body. Now, while you do this, imagine you're willing, you're using your emotions, you're using your thought. I want you to push all of that emotion, all that gas into a concentrated ball at your center, okay? Now, if you want, imagine that this gas is glowing, okay? And the more you compress and concentrate that emotion, the brighter it's going to glow, the heavier it's going to feel, okay? You're going to feel pressure, okay? That's why we're flexing. Now, I want you to release the tension in your upper body while ramping up the tension in your legs, okay? Your thighs, your calves, your feet. Now, as you release up here, I want you to take in a little bit of a breath. You want to let out the breath that you've already taken, okay? So to flex, and you're going to let it out. Okay, now imagine that gas that you've created, that concentration of gas that you've created, that emotion is being pushed. As you release, it's being pushed down and into your legs and straight into the ground. Now this will give you power, right? This is going to release some tension, and it's also going to clear your mind. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. Thank you very much for tuning in today. If you liked this episode, please follow and subscribe to our show for free. Also, give us a 5-star review, which will help us get noticed and recommended to others. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, and wherever else you get your content. Good luck out there.